The BF109F4 has the reputation in IL-2 for being one of the easiest planes in the game to put on its back. That reputation is earned. Now add 6 to 9 meters of wind per second and some heavy ground turbulence, and we've got a good test scenario. I'm going to land the same BF109 Friedrich a dozen times on a wet runway with the wind shoving me sideways, while checking out some of the most important flight sticks, going from cheap to expensive. This includes the Logitech Extreme 3D Pro, the T16000M, the WinCTRL Ursa Minor, the Logitech X52 Pro, the VKB Gladiator, the Virpil Aeromax, and 2 mystery high-end devices just for good fun. This isn't a build quality review or anything, the question is narrower. Which of these systems comfortably lets you keep a 109 pointed straight when the conditions are doing their best to take it away from you? Thanks to Beam Eye Tracker for making this video possible. More about Beam later. First, why this airplane in particular? The 109's landing gear is bolted to the fuselage, not the wings. The wheelbase is super narrow and the gear splays outward at an angle that makes the whole airplane want to pivot around its nose the second one wheel touches before the other. Pair that with a powerful, heavy engine up front and a propeller that talks you sideways every time you just breathe on the throttle. And you've got a fighter that makes this test even more interesting. The Luftwaffe lost an enormous number of these airframes to landing accidents during the war, even in dry weather. So, in this stress test, every weakness in the input chain, dead zone, sticky throttle, centering problems, axis bleed, and so on, is going to show up. The setup is simple. Same airfield, same wind, same Friedrich, same approach. I don't change my technique between runs, I just change the gear. There are 5 main things that matter when landing an aircraft in horrible weather conditions. First one is the precision around center. That's for small pitch and roll inputs, fighting the crosswind on the approach. The second factor is twist precision. That's the rudder. Thirdly, twist resistance. When a gust hits and you have to make quick adjustments, you don't want to bleed your pitch and yaw into the twist axis as unintended rudder input, and the other way around. Fourth, the brake lever. An analog axis is the best case, not just a button. And fifth, throttle precision. The more precise your throttle, the easier it becomes to have a controlled descent. Every system is used out of the box as it is, without any fiddling with its software. With that said, let's fly. First up is the Virpil Aeromax. This is the baseline. The one I came in expecting to perform the best in mid-tier, and the one everything else in this lineup has to beat. Alright, here we are. Wind from the right, raindrops on our canopy, and we're on final approach. Let's see what I'm doing here. Alright. I'm correcting a bit to the right. The wind gets stronger the closer we get to the ground. That's also where the turbulences are going to set in. Keeping it level so far. Now the wind is pushing me a bit too far to the left. Banking the plane upwind now a bit, so I don't have to crab my way onto the runway. Alright, this looks good. Okay. Ooh, turbulence pushed me a bit to the left. Correcting a bit to the right, flaring the plane, letting it hover, more corrections. Alright, leveling out, and we touch down. Alright. Now we brake. Whoop. A bit too clumsy on the brake lever here. Taking my time, letting it roll out, using the rudder to stay on the runway. Okay, and now we come to a stop. Alright, not too shabby for not having flown for months now. I started out with the Aeromax because it should be the easiest stick to land the plane with. Let's see how that holds up. The Aeromax is precise exactly where it needs to be. Perfect around the center, which is where you live on the approach or while firing your guns. The throttle lever is sharp and responsive, and the tension is adjustable. The twist axis is precise, and it has enough resistance to minimize bleeding unintended rudder motion into the airplane. And the brake lever is frankly awesome. A real analog axis with just the right amount of resistance, letting you modulate exactly how much braking force you need. It's also mounted at an offset and doesn't get in the way. Virpil nailed it with this one. It's always a joy to fly with it, I really love it. This really is the bar. Next up is the X52 Pro. A full HOTAS system from Logitech with a dedicated stick and throttle. It's been around for decades now, but still gets sold all over the place. Alright, back at the approach. I'm pre-banked a bit already, so I have a more controlled approach. Wingtip into the wind. Need to level it out a bit, let the wind push me a bit to the left. Alright, wingtip still in the wind, trying to center on the runway. I'm coming in faster than I normally would. In turbulence like this, a downdraft or a tailwind gust can drop your indicated airspeed by a chunk in an instant. And if you're flying just above stall limit, you're now below it. So you carry extra speed as a margin. Alright, coming in nice and centered. Still banked a lot into the wind. Hovering above the runway, leveling out, and we touch down. Okay, that was a bit rough, but I let that count. A storm landing you can walk away from is a good storm landing. Braking, we have no brake levers, so I need to push the button in quick succession for brake impulses. Brake, 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 brake. Now we release the rudder. Alright, and we came to a stop. Now let's assess what I experienced here. The X52 Pro has a noticeable dead zone around the center, and it's wobbly inside that zone. That's exactly the wrong combination for a precise landing. The gimbal also makes audible scratching noises. This is a brand new unit, by the way. The twist axis has only light resistance, which makes rudder inputs imprecise. Axis bleed is therefore okay-ish, but not terrible. The throttle is fine, good enough, but there's no brake lever, so I'm using a button. Landing the plane and slowing it down was still possible, as you just witnessed, but far from comfortable or enjoyable. Then we have the T16000M. It's also been around for a long while now. It's kinda the standard for a low-cost, workable HOTAS system. Before we take off, here's something important. Flying a plane gets a lot more convenient the moment you no longer have to use a hat or your keyboard to look around. The beam head and eye tracker solves this issue for just $30 by using the webcam you probably already have. It translates your head movement into the game, so you can easily track the runway on approach or quickly check your instruments. It's also quite nice for sightseeing or anything else having to do with situational awareness. On top of that, you get AI-enhanced eye tracking that's not only useful in games, but also lets you control your mouse pointer or lock your screen if you step away from your computer. Beam recently got a brand new interface, is easy to set up, and works out of the box with a lot of games, for example IL-2, DCS, Flight Simulator 2024 and Star Citizen. Grab it on Steam or get it directly from the developer's website to support them. There it also comes with a full 14 days money back guarantee, so you have lots of time to try out different games and configurations. Check out the links in the description below. With that said, let's continue testing the T16000M. Alright, we're at it with the T16000M. I've already tilted my wing into the wind, my right wing upwind. Pretty nice approach, nice and steady. We're pretty much on course on the center of the runway. Getting lower now. There, the turbulences are getting heavier now, lower to the ground. Whoop, a gust hit me there. The rudder rocker is doing some of the heavy lifting here. It's pretty good, it's super nice to control the plane. I have no pitch and yaw bleed into my rudder. Alright, flaring the plane, making some corrections, hovering above the runway. We're using the whole runway here. Whoop, another gust hit. Okay, slowly cutting throttle now. And touchdown. This is a pretty nice landing, pretty smooth. From the outside it looks smoother than with the Aeromax, and it is, but that doesn't mean the T16000M is better. I'm just getting better at landing. But as I said, the rockers, they do some of the heavy lifting here. They are really good. So let's assess what I just experienced here. The T16000M is stiff around the center, which sounds like the opposite problem of the X52, and that's exactly what it is. If you cross the center, you get a considerable bump, which makes small corrections harder than they need to be. Outside that center stiffness, it's precise enough. With the rudder rockers on the throttle grip, axis bleed is reduced to 0. It can't get any better in this department. The throttle axis is problematic though. It's often a bit sticky from the factory, which caused a crash during this test. The good news is that the fix is mechanical. Grease the throttle and you're suddenly working with a much better system. There's no brake lever though. I tried a button on the throttle, bad idea. I switched to a button on the stick so it wouldn't interfere with the rudder rockers, which works far better. Now let's continue with the VKB Gladiator. It has a glass fiber reinforced pincer gimbal and should perform quite good. Okay, approaching with the Gladiator. It's easy to hold this position, the twist axis works fine, there's not a lot of axis bleed. I'm a bit lower than I want to be, than I usually want to be on this approach. So I'll have to pre-flare the plane a little bit to gain a little bit of altitude again, which is also made easy with the super sensitive and reactive gimbal. Here we go, gaining a bit of altitude. Still a pretty nice approach, cutting the throttle, and we land. That was super smooth and a super comfortable approach. The gimbal is just awesome. As I said, it's a simple, tested and reliable gimbal. Very adjustable too. Not everything is perfect though, and that's what I'll explain to you now. This was the most effortless landing of the run so far, except for the Aeromax. The Gladiator's gimbal is super tight and super precise, second only to the said Aeromax. The reaction is immediate and flying slow is noticeably easier than with anything before this in the lineup. The twist axis has good resistance and reacts cleanly, no complaints here. The throttle wheel is okay, could be better. Not bad, it's certainly better than the slider on the T16000M, but not on the level of the Aeromax's lever. There's also no brake lever, we just get a button with all the drawbacks you're aware of right now. Next in line is the WinCTRL Ursa Minor. It copies the gimbal of the Gladiator, slightly less throw, so the resolution per degree of input is a touch worse. But you can feel the bones of it are the same stick. Alright, same procedure as every year, Herr Heinz, this time with the Ursa Minor. The gimbals aren't that far apart. In practice, the shorter throw doesn't matter as much. I can easily keep the plane banked into the wind. The throttle slider makes a difference though, it's more fine-grained, it's more precise, so I can control my descent better. Hovering in the middle of the runway, here's a slight gust that pushes me to the left. Corrections are easily done, it's super precise around the center, the gimbal does its job super well. Rolling, we don't have a brake lever, so we use a button instead again, but I'm already used to it. Yeah, so the Ursa Minor is, for the money, a pretty good stick. Here are the details. The Ursa Minor has the same precise reaction as the Gladiator. The throw is, as mentioned, less, which means slightly less precision overall, but it still easily dumpsters the X52 and the T16000M. Throttle adjustment, on the other hand, is more precise than the Gladiator's wheel. The slider has a long throw, so you're trading a bit of stick precision for better throttle control, depending on which one you pick. No brake lever, button. Our final contender is the super cheap Logitech Extreme 3D Pro. This is the one you might have expected to embarrass me, so did I, but watch this. Here we go with the $30–40 quote-unquote junk stick. It's surprisingly good, it does surprisingly well. The gimbal is a bit wobbly, yes, and I'm overcorrecting a bit, but after getting used to it, it's totally workable. The turbulences are throwing me around a little bit here, but it's all manageable. We're a bit off to the left, but no problem. Flaring the plane, doing some slight corrections. The main problem rather is the throttle, not the gimbal. But as you can see, it's all workable, and we touch down. Of course, we don't have a brake lever, so we use a button, but that's standard procedure by now. Rolling. Rolling, braking, and we come to a stop. And here's what I think about this stick. The Extreme 3D Pro really surprised me. I last used it more than a decade ago, and it was already a simple and cheap device back then. The stick has a slightly spongy feel, and yes, there's a dead zone, but it's small enough to not be too bothersome. The handling is genuinely okay. It's not as stiff around the center as the T16000M, which makes the small inputs you need on landing easier to dial in. And it's not as wobbly as the X52 and not as scratchy. The throttle adjustment is surprisingly good, better than I had expected at this price and with this knob. Slots in right below the Ursa Minor, no brake lever, you need to use a button on the grip or on the base. This is the stick that should make you reconsider what you actually need to spend. It's worse than the higher end sticks, of course, but the gap is smaller than the price tag would suggest. Of course you don't get quality sensors here, just potentiometers, but still, the price makes it viable. I'm calling the next two bonus rounds because they sit outside the price bracket of the rest of this lineup. It's not a fair fight by any means, but it's worth showing what the ceiling looks like. First one is the VKB Modern Combat Grip Ultimate on a Gunfighter Mark IV gimbal combined with the STECS standard throttle. Alright, let's go, VKB Modern Combat Grip Ultimate and friends. From the start, this is just better. This is peak control compared to the rest. It's so easy to keep the plane on course. Not that the whole procedure itself would become easier, you still need to know what you're doing. But all your control inputs are just translated so precisely and so spontaneously and so reactive that the plane just does what you want it to do. The same goes for the throttle. Look how easy it is for me to make the plane hover above the runway. With just some micro adjustments on the throttle, I can control the descent, and it's so much easier than with a slider or a throttle wheel. The brake lever also is perfect. It has a long throw, it has good resistance, which makes braking a breeze. We let the plane roll out. Rolling, 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 and braking. It's all a breeze. And we come to a stop. So, here are the details. The precision here is at a different scale. I'm making inputs I couldn't resolve on any of the earlier sticks, not even the Aeromax. The Gunfighter Mark IV gimbal is stupidly precise and smooth in a way that makes flying slow easier than with anything else on this list. Ergonomics of the aluminium grip are chef's kiss. The brake lever is near perfect with good resistance and ergonomics. Throttle control with the STECS is super precise and especially useful for micro-controlling the rate of descent in our scenario here. Some axis bleed occurs due to using the rudder via twist, but it's well under control. Still, at this price point, you should just get a proper set of rudder pedals and lock the twist. Everything the Aeromax does, this does to a more demanding standard. But it's also bigger, chunkier, more expensive, and only really works well ergonomically on desk mounts. Now, let's move on to our final bonus device. The MOZA AB6. It's MOZA's cheapest force feedback base. Let's see how it does. Let me tell you in advance, it doesn't take the top spot. Alright, force feedback. It's just so good. I can feel the wind on the control surfaces and I can feel it pushing against the plane. So I can make my adjustments very precisely, not just on vision and not on instruments or anything, just by feeling. Which gives you a split-second better reaction and it's easier to keep the plane pointed straight ahead. I can feel the wind, I can feel the turbulence. The precision around the center is quite good. There's a little bit of cogging and a little bit of coarseness that wasn't there in the Gunfighter, but it's still very good. Throttle adjustment isn't that precise though. As you can see, we're touching down now and it's a bit rough, but overall it's okay. Good thing is we have an analog brake slider, so we're rolling out now, slowly, steadily applying more brake force, letting the plane roll, and roll, and roll. And slowly we're coming to a complete stop. So, here's my assessment. The MOZA AB6 is force feedback, which makes everything easier in a different way. You feel the plane, you feel the wind on your control surfaces, the moment the wheels touch the ground, which means you can react before your vision catches up. It's smooth, not as smooth as the Gunfighter, not as smooth as the MOZA AB9, but smoother around the center than even the Aeromax. The throttle wheels are the weak point. Still workable, but worse than the Gladiator and the Ursa Minor slider. The good thing is that you have two of them, so one can act as an analog brake. The twist is super precise, no complaints there. Still, there's some axis bleed of course, that's inherent to using a twist axis. So, the FFB advantage is real. The analog wheels though pull it down a tier from where it could be. I also had some problems with cogging. Watch my review for more about that. So where does this leave us? The argument at the start was that landing a 109 in a storm comes down to 5 things. Within the main bracket, the Aeromax is the only stick that checks all 5 boxes. That's why it's the bar. The Gladiator and the Ursa Minor are tied below it. Both nail the first 3 criteria, but miss the brake lever. Between them it's a tie with a character difference. The Gladiator has the better gimbal, the Ursa Minor has the better throttle. The Extreme 3D Pro drops a level, the centering is spongy with a small dead zone, the brake lever is missing, but nothing about the stick is actively broken. It does what you ask, just less precisely. Considering what it costs, that's a remarkable place to land. The T16000M is below the Extreme 3D Pro in scorecard terms. Stiff center, no brake lever, sticky throttle that crashed me during this test. What it has going for it though is the rudder rocker, which lets you bypass twist entirely, and a throttle gimbal that is one greasing away from being competitive. It's the most fixable system in the lineup, but in stock form I can put it above the Extreme 3D Pro in this specific test. Of course it has other advantages like a lot more buttons, analog dials and so on, but like I said, that's not what we're testing here. The X52 Pro is the bottom. Center dead zone, light twist resistance only, a scratchy gimbal, no brake lever, that's 4 of 5 criteria failed. The throttle is fine, but it doesn't salvage the rest of the system. Outside the main bracket, the VKB Gunfighter Mark IV gimbal, combined with the MCG and with the STECS, also hits all 5 criteria of course, but at a higher absolute standard than the Aeromax, while being a lot more expensive at the same time. The MOZA AB6 is harder to slot. The FFB pushes its precision and intuitive control above the Aeromax, and the twist is excellent, but the throttle wheels are weak enough that they pull the package down a tier from where the FFB advantage alone would put it. So which one of those would you get? You might have other criteria that this test doesn't even touch. Don't forget to check out the Beam eye tracker, links are in the description below. There also is a full setup guide and review on my channel you can watch here. Thanks for stopping by, fly safe, and I'll see you there in a second.